Hey there, it is Sarah coming at you live inside the Literacy Lounge, which is our summer Facebook group for upper elementary teachers. And I am so excited to be connecting with you again tonight. If you joined our first bonus training on Friday, all about morphology, then that was such a fun conversation to have. And you guys were so inspirational with all of your takeaways and your ahas. So if you did not catch that one, you can always go back and catch the replay. But tonight we are going to be talking all about how to help all of your students succeed as writers. Students who struggle with writing and students who are already really skilled with writing. So I am super excited to dig into that with you. Just a few housekeeping things before we jump in. Just a reminder, a couple of there's a little bit of a delay. So I'm about 15 seconds ahead of you as far as when you hear what I'm saying. And so sometimes I might pause and let the comments come in so that way we can kind of engage with each other. We're going to do the same thing that we did after the bonus training on Friday. So one of your action items, once you finish this, is take some time, sort of reflect on what you learned, and then create a post that shares your takeaway from this session. And let me tell you, we have loved reading through your takeaways from Friday's bonus session. You guys have so many good ideas, and I'm personally inspired by the energy and excitement in this group. So we want you to post your takeaways again. And then I would encourage you also to go look at other people's takeaways and comment on them and ask questions and get ideas. This group is only open for another week, and we want you to get the most out of that. And so definitely take some time to comment and engage with other people who are posting their takeaways. And then just a reminder, every time you post a takeaway after our bonus sessions, you will be entered to win a $150 Amazon gift card after all three of our bonus trainings, which we'll announce the winner for next Thursday. We have 2 freebies and a PD certificate for this session, and those are linked in the caption or the description of this video. And I think Brooke will probably share them in the comments a couple times as well. And so be sure to grab those. And then just a reminder, tomorrow is our very first session of the Time Crunch Cure workshop. And if you've not already signed up for the session, I think we have just a handful of seats left for tomorrow. But we do have spots on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We would love to have you join us. I feel like that session is going to really sort of tie in everything that we're talking about during these bonus trainings and really give you just a cohesive plan for your literacy block. So similarly to the morphology session, I love engaging with you. I'm starting to see the comments come in. Definitely participate, be engaged, ask questions. If I don't answer them live, I will definitely come back and answer all of them. We want you guys to get so much value out of this group. And so don't be afraid to ask any questions. So today we are going to talk about 3 things that you can do to help all students succeed as writers. Before we do that, I would love to know, before we jump into the content, I want to know, how do you feel about teaching writing? Just type into the comments the first thing that comes to mind. 1 word, 2 words. How do you feel about writing? And for me, for so long, when I was in the classroom, teaching writing was overwhelming. And it was overwhelming to the point where I would sometimes try to avoid it. Like, we would do extra recess. We would do a longer read aloud. I was so overwhelmed by it that I would avoid it. And I know I'm not the only one that is overwhelmed by it or was overwhelmed by it. I see a lot of you saying stressed, worried, time consuming, daunting. And I don't know what it is, but there is just something about writing that I think feels, like I said, overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be like that. So I am excited for us to jump into it. Now, let's talk for a minute before we get to the really practical stuff, because you guys know I've got 3 practical things that you can do. But I do want to take a minute to acknowledge why teaching writing is so challenging. So if you can share in the comments, why are you worried about it? Why is it so daunting? Why is it stressful? Let us know some of the challenges. And while you do that, I'm going to share some of the reasons why teaching writing was so overwhelming for me, and probably why it's overwhelming for other upper elementary teachers. And I think one of the biggest things that made it challenging is that I had students coming to me in 4th grade who could not write a complete sentence. Yeah, by the end of the year, I was supposed to get them to write a 5-paragraph essay. I was actually supposed to get them to write 2 5-paragraph essays on the end of year state test. And to me, I could not find the path from going to students who can't write complete sentences to students who are writing an essay in a year. I could not connect those dots. The other thing why I think it was so overwhelming for me is the curriculum that I was provided did not give me tools or resources to support students who struggled with writing. It was great for my high-performing students, but not so much for my struggling writers. And so as I was teaching writing, my students who struggled with writing continued to struggle, and my students who were good at writing continued to get good. So I felt this sort of guilt, or really just like this discomfort of my writing instruction is not actually helping. And then I feel like one of the things that really made it difficult for me is that I did not know enough about how to help my students build a strong writing foundation. So I knew that they had to write a 5-paragraph essay. I knew I had all these grammar standards I had to teach, but I did not understand how they connected together and how I could communicate it in a way that my students would understand. So I felt inadequate or ill-equipped to help my students become stronger writers. And the only thing that I really knew how to do was just have my students write more. Let's write more essays. Let's write more paragraphs. And writing more does not always help our students, especially students who struggle. And I see, as I'm looking back at the comments, I see a lot of you have the similar things. Students struggle with forming sentences. You know, some students will write an entire page while others are stuck on the very first one. There's no curriculum, scope, and sequence. And so writing is a challenge. So let me acknowledge that. I hear your challenges. I have felt your challenges. And I know that it is a difficult thing. But the good news is that there are easy things that we can do that really make a difference and have a big impact on our students' writing confidence, but also their writing output. And so, like I said, today I do have 3 really practical things that I am going to share with you guys, because I want to make sure that you have very concrete ideas on what you can do in your classroom during your writing time. But before I jump into those really practical ideas, I want to take a minute and I want to explain the building blocks of writing. And if you listened to our writing private podcast this summer, then you're already familiar with this a little bit. But the thing that we need to understand is, in order for our students to become successful writers, in order for them to get to that point where they can write a 5-paragraph essay, they have to understand how writing works. They need to understand how everything fits together. And this is something that I realized I didn't have a very strong understanding of. And so, in case you need a little bit of sort of the background knowledge like I needed, I want to share these building blocks of writing with you as well, so that way you can be prepared to share them with your students. So in order for students to, I missed my slides up here a little bit. So yes, and it can be challenging to provide writing instruction that supports students at both ends of the spectrum. And so what I want to share with you today is making sure that you understand that there is a way that we can teach all students that will help all students succeed, whether they struggle or not. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we understand the building blocks of writing. So the first thing that this starts with is words. All essays, all writing has words. And oftentimes when we think about words, we focus on the meaning side of things. But especially from the context of writing, it's important that our students understand that words also have a function. They have a job in the sentences. Words can tell us who or what. Sometimes words tell us an action, and sometimes words tell us, how ideas in a sentence are connected together. So words are connecting words. And words are combined to form phrases. And phrases are a very powerful part of writing, because phrases give us more details than just a singular word. Phrases also have a function to do, and it's really important that students understand the different types of phrases and the function of the phrases, because phrases, when they are combined, form clauses. And clauses are sometimes a complete sentence, and a clause has to have, this is why it's important for students to know about phrases. Clauses have to have a noun phrase and a verb phrase in order for them to be a clause. So if students don't understand phrases, they're not going to understand clauses. And here's the thing about clauses. Clauses lead us into sentences. All sentences are independent clauses. So really, in order for students to understand what a complete sentence is, they have to have this knowledge of how words form together to form phrases. Phrases go together to form clauses, and clauses go together to form sentences. And when students have this understanding, it's going to be easier for them to understand when a sentence is a complete sentence or an incomplete sentence. And it's also going to be easier for them to understand how to add more detail to their sentence, because we can give them language like add in a prepositional phrase, or add in an adverbial phrase, or add in a dependent clause to your independent clause. And so when students have this knowledge, it's going to help them understand how language works together to form the sentences. And oftentimes in our writing instruction, we teach the parts of speech. So we teach, the different 8 parts of speech, and we talk about words and their meaning. And then we jump right into sentences. And we miss talking about phrases and clauses, which are actually really essential if students are going to become successful writers. So once students get to the point where they are strong and competent and capable with writing sentences, then they're going to understand that sentences, when they are very well organized in a specific way, those form paragraphs. And when paragraphs are put together, they form those longer texts like the 5-paragraph essays or the books that we read. And so we want students to realize that from words all the way up to these longer texts, every single step along the way is helping us to become a stronger writer. And this is important for teachers to understand, and it's important for students to understand. And one of the freebies that we are giving you guys is a set of reference sheets. You can kind of see them here. And this has language on it that you can use to share with your students to help them understand the building blocks of writing. You can also use it for yourself and learn more about the different types of phrases and clauses and how all of these build together. And so I want you to take a minute and think about, how would the knowledge of the building blocks of writing help your students? And let us know in the comments how having this understanding would impact their writing. And while you guys are writing that down, one of the things that I want you to understand is not only does this knowledge help our students, but it helps you as a teacher as well. Because here's the thing that we need to realize. If a student is working on a 5-paragraph essay and they are struggling with that essay, they don't need more practice with writing essays. What they probably need practice with is learning how to develop a paragraph and organize a paragraph and put a paragraph together. And if a student is struggling with a paragraph, they don't need more practice with paragraph writing. What they probably need help with is understanding how to put sentences together and how to organize sentences and how to form correct sentences and how to add more details to the sentences. And if a student is struggling with sentences, we don't need to say, write more sentences. We need to back up and make sure they understand how clauses and phrases and words work together. So if you understand the building blocks of writing, you really have an awesome diagnostic tool that you can use to figure out where in the process do your students struggle with writing. And rather giving them more practice with something that they're struggling with, you can back up a little bit and fill in the gaps so that way they have the knowledge and the tools to be able to move forward and actually make progress with writing. And I love a lot of you how you're saying like build. And I think this right here is such a good sort of reminder that, the incomplete sentences, that one is a really good reminder, but where's the one? This one right here. So show them how it builds so that we can start small and end big. And I think this is a really important concept, especially for our students who do struggle with writing and possibly have, like competence issues when it comes to writing. If we show students how, if you understand words, you just got to put a few words together to form a phrase. And if you understand phrases, you're going to put a few phrases together to form a clause, and so on and so on. It becomes so much more attainable rather than starting the year off with, hey, write this 5-paragraph essay, even though you don't understand how it works. So teaching your students the building blocks of writing really gives them a process to be confident writers. Okay, so hopefully that helps you sort of get an idea and a lens for where we're going with the rest of this training. So the 3 things, now we're getting to the practical side, because I know this idea of the building blocks of writing, that is great. And I can't wait to hear your ideas on how you want to share that with your students. But I also know that you're looking for really practical things that you can do in your classroom. So there are 3 things that you can do that will help all students succeed at writing. And I'm going to be very intentional about making sure that not only do I share these specific strategies, but I explain to you how it helps students who struggle with writing as well as students who excel with writing. And the first one is focusing on sentence level writing tasks. That has to be something that we do on a daily basis in our upper elementary classroom. We also want to give students a framework for writing paragraphs. And we want to make sure that we aren't teaching writing in isolation. And that one I think is going to be really important. And it kind of reminds me of that transfer step when we did our word study training. We want to make sure that students transfer that word study knowledge to their independent reading. And the same thing, we don't want writing to stay only happening during our writing instruction. We want it to sort of flow out into every other part of our instructional day. So the first thing that we want to do is make sure that we are focusing on sentence level writing tasks. And this is important because if students struggle to write a complete and coherent sentence, they have no hope of ever being able to write a clear and coherent paragraph or essay. So if you have students who struggle to write complete sentences, your number one job and the thing that you should focus on the most is sentence writing. Because if they can't ever figure out how to write a sentence, they're never going to get to the point where they can write an essay. So this has to be our number one focus if students struggle with writing, but it is going to help our advanced students as well. So a really easy way to do this is with our sentence, not just our sentence writing routine. We do have one though, is with a sentence writing routine. And you can use it as a warm up for your writing block. We do have a sentence writing routine, and this is one of the freebies that we're offering you as well. I know a lot of you, if you're in our membership, that you have access to it and you've been using it with your students. I know a lot of you have probably purchased it from TPT as well. We've gotten so much great feedback from this routine and how it helps students develop their sentence writing abilities. And this routine basically has 5 sentence writing tasks. So every day, students do a different sentence writing task, and each of the tasks kind of help with their understanding of sentences from a variety of angles. So I'm going to share 3 of the sentence writing tasks in this routine. And I want to share with you not just the tasks, but really help you understand how you can use those tasks outside of the routine to focus on sentence level writing in other parts of your instructional day as well. But in general, this is a great way to start your writing block. You could spend 5 minutes every day, and that's not a long time, 5 minutes every day working on sentence level writing, and it will have a huge impact on your students' writing. So one of the sentence writing tasks that you can do is called find and fix the fragment. And raise your hand if you have students who struggle with writing fragments. I feel like it was either fragments or run-on sentences. It was like we could never end up in the middle. And so knowing that so many of our students write in fragments, this is something that we want to make sure that we address in our instruction. And I think part of the reason why students write in fragments is because they lack knowledge of phrases. They don't understand that a sentence has to have a noun phrase and a verb phrase, and they can't identify the phrases within a sentence, so they don't know that it's incomplete. So for find and fix the fragment, whether this is in the routine or this is something you do outside of the routine, you're going to give your students 3 sentences. However, one of the sentences is actually a fragment. And it can be helpful if all 3 of the sentences are on a related topic and they all look around the same length. So the bus drove the children home after school. On the way home, the children and Jenny finished her homework on the way home. So students would have to find the fragment. So the goal is in this one, they would recognize that sentence number 2 is the fragment. But then it's not just identifying the fragment, it is fixing it. So this is where students have to be able to recognize, okay, that sentence is missing a verb phrase. I have to add in a verb phrase in order to make it complete. But this also gives you an opportunity. You can, address and name on the way home is an adverbial phrase. The children is a noun phrase. So we need to add in a verb phrase to the rest of the sentence. And you can have the same conversation about the 2 sentences that are complete. So this is a great task and activity to do with your students, and it doesn't take a long time. Notice I went through this whole thing here. Now, granted, your students might take a little bit longer, but this could be done in 5 minutes. And if you did this once a week, or, even if you did this every day, it would really help your students understand what a complete sentence is. So this is something that you can do during this sentence writing routine, but this is also something that you can do outside of your writing block. So yes, it could be a daily warm up to your writing block, but you could also use this as an exit ticket at the end of your lesson. So whether you're doing math or science or social studies, give your students a fragment, give them either the action or the noun, and tell them that in order for them to, finish it, they need to make it a complete sentence and also have it be true and reflective of what they learned in the lesson. So finding and fixing fragments could become part of your exit tickets for students to end the lesson. You could also do this as a reading response prompt that students need to complete. And this is something that we try to occasionally incorporate into our small group lessons as questions. So rather than asking students a question and having them complete it with a sentence, give them a fragment that has them recall details from the story. So maybe you use the character's name and they have to fill in the details, or you include the action and they have to add in which character did that action. So using a fragment as a way for students to respond to a text can be a great way for them to not only work on their sentence comprehension, but also to work on their sentence writing ability. So that is one sentence level activity that you could do with your students. Another one that you can do is expanding sentences. And this one is so good for students who struggle to add details because we're building on it very slowly. So with this, you can either have students look at a picture, look at an artifact, or you could even just have them come up with a sentence on their own. But they're going to start by telling you who. So the 3rd grade students. Then the next one is you're going to ask them, what are they doing? What's the action? So the 3rd grade students stretched. And this is a great opportunity for your students to realize that when we have just a noun phrase, there's no capital letter and there's no punctuation. But the minute we add in that verb phrase, all of a sudden we have a complete sentence. And now the sentence requires that we have a capital letter and punctuation. I think too often we rely so much on grammar worksheets to teach these grammar concepts. And the reality of it is grammar worksheets don't work. Students can ace a capitalization test and never capitalize a letter in their sentence. They can get punctuation worksheets correct all day long, but they forget to apply it to their actual writing. And so one of the things that we can do is be really mindful of when we are doing these sentence writing tasks with our students is to explain and show how those grammar concepts that we teach connect to our sentence writing. So as students continue to expand their sentence, we're going to ask them, okay, well, what did the students stretch? The third grade students stretched their muscles. When did the students stretch? Before class, the third grade students stretched their muscles. Why? Before class, the third grade students stretched their muscles so they would be ready for gym. And all of a sudden, the students went from writing a very short sentence, the third grade students stretched, to writing a long, complex sentence with lots of details. But it happened very gradually and it happened very slowly, and this is very doable for your students. So having students regularly practice expanding sentences is a great way for them to be able to learn how to add more details into their writing. And I saw a lot of you guys said that your students struggle to add details, so we want to give them practice in isolated examples to do that. Now, this is a great activity to use as part of the routine, but you can incorporate it into other parts of your instructional day. This could be a specific revision task. So after your students have completed their paragraph writing or their essay development, have them pick one sentence and expand it. Have them ask the question, okay, can I say, when this happened or why it happened or what is happening? So have them get in the habit of picking a sentence and expanding that to help revise their writing. But you could also use this as a summary of your read aloud, especially if you're asking questions. Okay, students write down, who is the story about? What were they doing? When were they doing it? Why were they doing it? All of those details need to be included in a summary, but they're going to form their summary in bite-sized bits while also working on writing a nice detailed sentence. You could also use this when you're exploring artifacts and other content areas. So you could show students either a map or a picture or bring in an artifact from something, and students are going to look at it and they're going to answer all of those questions and then expand a sentence. So they're not only working on their writing skills, but they're also learning about the specific content areas. So we can be really intentional about incorporating sentence writing tasks in so many other parts of our instructional day. And yes, this is part of the membership. And we're also actually working on, so the sentence writing routine is part of the membership. And one of the things we're working on is a really fun holiday version of it, because I know teachers love to do holiday tasks. And so we'll have very specific sentence writing tasks that are related to seasons and holidays, just to make it even fun for students to work on sentence writing tasks as well. Then, okay, so the third, and it says 4, but that's because we're talking about 4 types of sentences and my brain was having a mishap there. But the third one I'm going to talk about is writing different sentence types. And while this sounds basic, this is actually something that is really important for our students to understand, that there are statements, questions, commands, and exclamations. And you can have students look at a picture and write all 4 of those sentence types. You can, have them talk about an experience, a field trip, a class that they went to. But the idea is that students are getting practice writing 4 different sentence types, sort of in the same writing session. So sea turtles are endangered is a statement. How many different types of sea turtles are there? That's a question. Don't disrupt the sea turtle's nest. That's a command. And then sea turtles are the cutest. That is an exclamation. And this can be great because this is something that we want our students. These are the types of questions or skills that we want our students to know how to have, because it helps provide variety to their writing. So often students want to write simple statements, and it can be really boring to read an entire paragraph that is composed of simple statements that are, 4 or 5 words long. So we want students to realize at a very basic level that there are different ways that we can structure our sentences. But you can use this same sort of activity in other ways. One of the easiest ways to give students practice with this is when they're writing their topic and concluding sentence. So tell students, when we're writing, we don't want to just go with the first idea that pops into our head. That's not how writers write. That's not how we want to write. And so when you're writing a topic sentence, tell them that one of their options should be a statement, one of their options should be a question, and one of their options should be an exclamation. Same thing for their concluding sentence. But a really easy way that you can incorporate this task in is using it again, either as an exit ticket or a daily reflection or even a morning warm up. And you could do a 3-2-1. So have students write 3 statements about what they learned. So share 3 things basically that they learned. Have them write 2 questions and then have them write 1 command. So basically a piece of advice for somebody who's learning that skill. So if you're teaching adding fractions, students would say, what are 3 statements that are true about adding fractions? What are 2 questions that either they had or someone might have about adding fractions? And then what's 1 command that they need to keep in mind when they are adding fractions? So this can be a great way, again, for students to practice sentence writing skills, but apply it to specific content that you are teaching them. Okay, hopefully you're starting to see how this can benefit all students, but let me just remind you, this, first of all, is going to be essential. If our students struggle with writing, we have to give them explicit practice with sentence writing tasks. But sometimes it's not enough just to say, write a sentence. We have to give them specific sort of commands. So again, you're going to be finding fragments and fixing them. You're going to be adding details to them. You're going to be writing the different types of sentences. This constant exposure to sentences is going to help our students who struggle with writing become stronger and more confident. But in addition to that, if a student has low writing self-esteem and they already say, I'm not a good writer, and we ask them to write a paragraph or a 5-paragraph essay, they're going to shut down and they're going to give up before they even get started, which is not what we want. But if we say, hey, all you're doing today are writing 4 sentences, or all you're doing today is fixing this fragment, that is a much more attainable task. And it is such an easy thing for our students who struggle with writing to envision themselves being successful. And so sentence level writing tasks help our struggling students develop confidence in writing, which is necessary if we want them to be successful writers. But this helps our students who are already strong writers. And the thing that I think is important for us to realize is oftentimes our students who are already strong writers and very capable, they know they're capable and they know they're strong. But what they don't often get is that white space or that head space or even sort of the direction that you're going to work on refining your craft. We want our students who are strong writers to be really fluid with word choice and to really understand sentence structure and to get creative with the order in which they use words and understand how they can add in different clauses and phrases and how they can be really creative with their sentence writing. But if they know that they can write sentences and they just crank out paragraph after paragraph without ever taking a step back to slow down their writing, to really think about what it is that they're writing, they're just going to sort of stay at that good level. But when we allow our students who are already strong writers to dig into sentence writing, we are giving them that opportunity to become really great writers, because all writing comes back to sentences. So we need to have our students, all of them, be really confident with their ability to write sentences. So I would love to know in the comments, which one of these activities do you think your students would benefit from the most? Great question here. Well, I'm kind of waiting. When should you introduce this routine and what foundational skills do they need to know before trying this? So this would be one of those things that, a lot of it depends, because again, depending on where your students come in, if they're a 3rd grader, if they're a 5th grader, what their foundation is. So one of the things that I think is important to keep in mind is that sometimes when you introduce a routine, it can also be your opportunity to introduce these foundational skills, because you're going to learn really quickly. If your students have no idea what a sentence is, you're going to learn that quickly. If they don't know what a fragment is, if they don't know, how to add in certain details. But anytime you're introducing a routine, I think it's a really good idea to model it together and practice it together for multiple days and multiple weeks. And while you're introducing that routine and doing it really as a whole group, you can then use that time to build in the foundational skills. We don't necessarily have to have this big formal lesson to teach our students what a noun phrase is or what a verb phrase is. You could write a sentence on the board and explain those 2 concepts. And your students might not master those concepts at the end of that lesson, but when you're giving them the vocabulary and the exposure, they're going to be able to come back to it time and time and time again. And I think that's important to remember is when we're using a routine, we don't need to have mastery happen after 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. The reason why we want to focus on sentence level writing activities constantly is because we want our students to have the exposure so that way eventually they get to levels of mastery. We don't need them to master, finding and fixing a fragment the first time they do it. They have all year to get there. So hopefully that is helpful. I love that. Yep. Expanding sentences. I love that. Yeah. Somebody said, gosh, all of them. I know it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, these are all great, which is why if you do the sentence writing routine, you can use one of these activities every single day and your students get practice throughout the entire year. So this is a quote from Natalie Wexler, who's the author of The Writing Revolution. That is one of our favorite books that we use to really sort of inform our writing resources. And the importance of spending plenty of instructional time working with sentences can't be stressed enough. Sentence level work is the engine that will propel your students from writing the way they speak to using the structures of written language. So if you feel like you don't have time to focus on sentences, come back to this quote, because if we don't focus on sentences, we're sort of going to be stuck. And so sentence level writing is so important, and you do have time to incorporate that into your instructional day. Okay, the second very practical thing that you can do to help all students succeed at writing is teach students a routine for paragraph writing. And really, when I say routine, what we're teaching them is a framework for how to craft a paragraph. Because while sentence level writing is important, as you guys saw from those building blocks, and as you know, if you're upper elementary, our students have to be able to write essays at some point. That is the goal that we're getting. But here's the thing. In order for students to write a strong essay, they have to be able to write a strong paragraph. And so we're going to start with what students need. So we want to give them a framework for being able to write a really awesome paragraph. And I think it's important when we think about the writing process, we think about brainstorm and drafting and revising and editing and publishing. And while we have that process, what we also need to realize is sometimes the writing process does not go in depth enough to give our students the confidence or tools to craft a well-written paragraph. So we really need to give them a framework that has tasks that are broken down into much smaller bite-sized objectives. So when we tell our students, we want you to write a paragraph, they know exactly what it is that they need to do. And so a paragraph routine that you can use with your students, and this is one of the things, and you can kind of see a preview of it here. This is one of the things that we are so excited about adding into the membership this next year, but actually adding in the lessons and the resources to help you teach this paragraph writing routine and all of the different writing genres to your students. But whether you decide to join the membership or not, you can still use this routine for your students. And so what we want to do is teach students to brainstorm and outline, write a topic sentence, draft the body of their paragraph, write a concluding sentence, revise and edit, and publish. And I'm going to kind of talk through some of these things a little bit more in depth, but this is sort of the overview. And the thing that I want you to realize with this is something that you're going to break down, and it is going to happen maybe over the course of a week. Depending on your students, for sure, the first time you teach this, you want to really break it down, because we don't want our students to be overwhelmed. We want them to feel motivated. We want them to feel like they have the ability to be successful. And we want them to actually, complete these tasks independently and with success. So one of the most important things for students to realize is that when we brainstorm, we also need to form an outline. And if you think about the traditional writing process, we usually take students from brainstorming right into drafting. But students usually don't know from a brainstorm how they want to organize their writing. And if students don't have a plan or an outline for their writing is not going to be very good. And so we want to make sure that students understand how to create an outline. And so when you're teaching your students how to craft a paragraph, you're going to give them that framework for their paragraph. So depending on the genre, if they're writing an expository, their first sentence is going to be their topic sentence. They might have 3 to 4, body sentences that share the details, and then they're going to have a concluding sentence. So your outline in this framework is going to teach them the types of sentences that they need to have. And you're going to show them that when they're outlining, they're simply taking notes, they're, using symbols, they're coming up with a plan, and then they're going to come back and write sentences to help execute that plan. And outlining is such an important part of the writing process, but it is something that usually gets skipped. So we want to make sure that our students know how to do that. So we want to make sure then that students also know how to craft a really good topic sentence. And this is where oftentimes, when we're sort of having students write a paragraph, and this is something that I was guilty of when I was in the classroom, is, okay, start your paragraph with a topic sentence. It's the main idea, but we wouldn't give them a framework for how to write that topic sentence. So step number 2 is write a topic sentence, but we want to show them your topic sentence could be a question. It could be a sentence within a positive. It could be a sentence with a subordinating conjunction, and we want to give them examples. We also want students to get in the habit of not just writing the first sentence that comes to mind, but actually, especially for something as important as the topic sentence, to come up with 2, 3, maybe 4 options and then pick the best. And so when we slow down our writing instruction and we spend an entire day focusing on a topic sentence, we're teaching our students that the process is more important than the product, but we're also giving them time to experience success with each step of the writing process. And I know that we feel rushed and pressured for time. I felt that, I mean, tremendously. Like I said, my first year teaching fourth grade, I taught in Texas back in the day when fourth graders had to write both an expository and a narrative on the STAR test. And having students that could not write complete sentences, the idea of having them get to that point felt so overwhelming. And I felt pressured and rushed that I had to start with essays right away. But if we continue to have students write essays and they're not ready, more essay writing is not going to help our students become stronger writers. So if we can remind ourselves, like, let's take a step back and let's slow down the process. And if our students can, after a month become really confident in paragraph writing and they know how to write a paragraph, when we introduce an essay, they're going to breeze through that because they understand how to communicate their ideas in a paragraph. So you want to make sure that you are giving your students a very step-by-step process to complete paragraph writing. And an easy to follow routine that breaks down the tasks of writing a paragraph into small, manageable tasks that students can confidently tackle. And again, this whole idea is we want students to feel confident and that they can be successful with it. So let's break it up and have students tackle these tasks one by one. Now, let's think about, how does this paragraph routine benefit all students? Well, again, if we have a student who struggles with writing, then they're going to feel confident because rather than in an entire day, or an entire week having to write an essay, we're slowing it down and they're only having to focus on just writing a paragraph. Maybe every day they're only focusing on 1 or 2 sentences. But we're also giving them a very specific framework so they don't have to question or wonder what sentence comes next, or how do I start my paragraph, or what's the next thing that I need to do to finish my writing product. We're literally telling them a step-by-step process so that they can be successful. And on the flip side, I know we've got some students who they could write a paragraph even if we told them nothing. Like, they would know how to do it and they could write a good one. But again, we want our students who are strong writers to have that opportunity to become really great writers. And so things like forcing them to write 3 or 4 options for their topic sentence, to encouraging them to play with word choice. And when they get to the revising and editing, adding in, the expanding sentences, adding in transition words. When students really get that opportunity to take a paragraph that they know how to write, but add to it and refine it to make it better, that's when our good writers become great writers. So a paragraph routine is going to help all students with writing. So I would love to know in the comments, do you think that your students would benefit from having a paragraph writing framework? And tell us a little bit about that. I know. And I saw this here in 3rd grade, Texas has to write both, which that breaks my heart because I feel like anytime we put that expectation on students, it kills the joy of writing and it makes our jobs as teachers so much more stressful. But, here's the other thing to think about. And I'll also give you guys a little bit of just a heads up with the way we're structuring the paragraph writing is, even though in 2nd semester we have students, let's see, let me hide this one. Even though we have students that are expected to write an essay by the 2nd semester, if you can make it your goal by the end of 1st semester for students to be strong with paragraph writing, then 2nd semester, when you start focusing on that test prep, your students have the foundation and the tools to be successful with it. So when you think about your writing instruction, and I know it can feel like anxiety producing to say, not going to focus on or worry about essays until 2nd semester. But think how much easier writing an essay would be if, when you gave your students a prompt, they could successfully create a paragraph. And think about how helpful it would be for your students if during, the first 3 months of school, all you focused on was having them write a paragraph. They would feel so confident, they would feel successful, and they would have the tools to understand when you introduce essays that they could be successful with it. So within our paragraph writing routine that we're adding into the membership, and that is going to be forever, it will only be a membership exclusive resource. So that will not be available outside of the membership. But every month we're going to be releasing resources for a different genre. And we're going to be giving 4 different paragraph writing routines. So the idea is every week you would complete one of them. One of the paragraph writing routines is going to approach writing from a reading perspective, because we know at the end of the year, the constructed response test requires students to read and then write a constructed response. And so we want students to have practice with that in sort of a natural way. And so students will, one of the prompts in the membership, so one of the weeks, it'll have them be, read read a narrative story and then write a summary of it, or read a science text and write an expository from it. So they go through the paragraph writing process, but with the end goal of responding to a text. So that way, when you get to the second semester and you're starting to think about test prep, your students will already have had practice writing in response to a text. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, moving on here. All right. So the third thing that I want you to do is not limit your writing instruction to just your writing block. And strong writing skills are necessary for students to be successful in all other content areas and in life. And I think maybe even more so than reading. I mean, I know reading obviously is important, but like seriously, writing is essential for students to be successful in all other parts of education and in life. And so since writing is essential in all other content areas, we don't need to limit our writing instruction to just during our literacy block. And so when you are, and sorry, I didn't realize my image was not centered here, but when you are thinking about your writing instruction, anytime your students have their pencil to their paper, you have an opportunity to help them improve their writing. So I want you to think about what are the opportunities during your instructional day where your students are regularly writing, and how could you use that as an opportunity to reinforce some writing skills? So when students are completing an exit ticket, if you require them to explain how they solved a math problem, if they're doing a report or project for science or social studies, or if they're doing a reading response or summarizing, all of these require students to write. And anytime students are writing, it's an opportunity for us to reinforce the building blocks of writing, for us to reinforce the writing process, for us to reinforce especially some of those key grammar skills. I know in our school, oftentimes on Fridays, students would take a problem-solving quiz in math, and part of that quiz would be to explain how they solved the problem. So not just could they get the problem correct, but could they also explain it? And my students, it's like they would forget that all of a sudden, even though they're writing for math, they would not have complete sentences. They would not write in capital letters. They would not include punctuation. And that is not uncommon. It's like students know that during writing time, they need to follow the writing rules, but they forget that, when they're outside writing time, they can just let it go. So we want to make sure that we are constantly reminding students that anytime that they are writing, we want to be putting our writing knowledge in practice. And so things that you can incorporate into your discussion are brainstorming an outline. So if students are going to fill out an exit ticket, have them take a sticky note and outline their exit ticket response before they jot it down. Word choice, students are doing a explanation on their math problem solving. Have them brainstorm, what words could you, replace with more specific ones. Transition words. Sentence structure, have students, whatever it is that they're writing, see if they can take a simple sentence and turn it into a complex one, or see if they can write the different sentence types. Organization, grammar rules, capitalization, punctuation. These are all important to writing. And they're not just important to writing class, they're important to student success as writing anytime. So I really want you to think about this idea of anytime your students have the pencil to their paper, it is an opportunity for you to address writing skills that you can support and improve with your students. And this goes back to what I said. We want students to focus more on the process of writing rather than the result. And I think especially when we start to bring in conversations of improving writing in other parts of our instructional day, our students start to realize that the exit ticket is not just about them completing the exit ticket. The science report is not just about them creating the science report. It's about them becoming really strong writers and strong communicators in all subjects. And that is a process. So definitely think about how you can incorporate writing into other parts of your instructional day. And of course, how does this benefit students? And this one is beneficial for all students. There's really not like distinguishable between students who struggle and students who are strong. But again, so often our students are our instructional day, and it's just the way that it is set up, but things happen in silos and they happen in isolation. And so students tend to associate what we do in writing only during writing time. But what we want students to realize is the sentence writing that takes place during your writing routine or your warm-up are the same skills that they should incorporate into all of their writing. They should always be on the lookout for fragments. They should always be paying attention to noun phrases and verb phrases. And so we want to make sure that our students understand, whether they struggle with writing or they excel with writing, that writing is not something that happens in isolation. Writing is not something that is specific to writing only time. It is something that needs to transfer into all parts of your instructional day. So I would love to know in your comments or in the comments, just as you're thinking about this, where in your instructional day do you envision having an opportunity to support writing? Where can you see it's like, okay, this is a great time where I could take an additional 2 or 3 minutes and focus on some grammar rules or talk about sentence structure or have my students outline their writing before they begin. Let us know where you can start to envision focusing on writing outside of your actual writing block. Let's see. I saw a couple comments here that I wanted to. This one right here. It's so important to give kids structure, guidance with their writing. And I think knowing how important that is needs to serve as a reminder for us as teachers. We need to make sure then that we're constantly giving students structure and guidance with their writing, even outside of our writing block. So making sure that students understand, like I said, if they're doing an exit ticket, if they're doing a science report, that we take time to give them that structure to be successful with their writing. Now, if you are playing our secret phrase game, remember we are every bonus training, we are leaving a word or a phrase. And if you missed our bonus training on Friday, you can go back and rewatch that. But the phrase that you need to jot down today is students to become. And then at the end of the week, you'll be able to put together all of the phrases that we've released during the trainings, and we'll give you a form to submit, and you can enter to win an annual membership to the Stellar Literacy Collective. And again, this game is open to both current members, and if you decide to join us this week, you'll be able to enter as well. And if you end up joining the membership and you end up being one of our winner for this, we'll happily reimburse you for that. Now, just to sort of recap, 3 things that are going to help all students succeed at writing. When you focus on sentence level writing tasks, that is going to help all students. When you give students a framework for paragraph writing, that is going to help all students. And when you teach writing in all other subjects, basically when you don't teach it in isolation, that is going to help all students. And this is the thing, this is sort of the theme of, this connects back to what we talked about during morphology. And we're going to talk about this during our small group session and during the Time Crunch Care workshop. But we need to slow down our instruction if we want our students to speed up their understanding. So often we feel rushed as teachers, and I completely get it. Teachers have a lot of demands and a lot of expectations. But when we rush through the content and when we focus so much on, I've got to get through this objective and this lesson, and we have to hurry up and hurry up and hurry up, our students never have time to actually develop the understanding of the content. And so we need to be very intentional about slowing down our instruction if we want our students to speed up their understanding. And I think this is very true in writing. If we want our students to eventually be able to write that 5-paragraph essay, and if we want them to write it well, we can't jump into essay development at the start of the year if our students are still struggling with sentence writing and paragraph writing. We need to slow down, because when we go through our instruction at a pace that is going to help our students experience success, their understanding will speed up. And when their understanding speeds up, it's going to allow you to eventually get through all of the content that you need in the year. So keep that in mind. I know it's such a hard reminder for teachers, but it really does work. All right. Of course, there are some action items for you because we want you to get the most out of this group, the most out of these sessions. So 3 things that you can do to help all students succeed at writing. First of all, pick 1 or 2 of the sentence writing activities that we shared today. If you want to grab a sample of that routine, or if you're using the whole routine, then you are already on your way. If not, pick 1 or 2 of them that I shared today and use that as a warm-up for your writing block. The other one is come up with a framework. You can use the one that I shared, go back and take a screenshot of it. And even if you don't get our resources in the membership, then you can still use that same framework when you're teaching your students. But give your students a very step-by-step process, the exact steps that they're going to take. And don't rush the process of writing paragraphs. Really help them feel confident in their ability to write a paragraph. And then the third thing is identify 1 or 2 opportunities outside of your writing block where you can focus on improving students' writing skills. Because remember, writing is essential for all other subjects. And so we should feel confident and comfortable in our ability to really focus on it, whether we're teaching science, math, social studies, or even if it's part of like your morning reflection, focus on those writing skills. So I am so glad that you decided to join me on a Sunday evening. I hope that you got so much out of this. I cannot wait to read your takeaways. So do not forget, if you want to be entered to win a $150 gift card to fund your classroom library, then after the session, create a post that shares your biggest takeaway from the session. And like I said, this group is only open for another week here, and you guys have so many good ideas. My team and I have just been so inspired and impressed impressed with the energy and excitement that you guys have. I think your students are so incredibly lucky to have a teacher who is willing to give up time during the summer to learn and engage and really get excited about teaching this next year. So read the other comments. There are so many good ideas in this group for ways that we can put these things into practice. So create that post. And then I hope that you'll be joining us for one of our Time Crunch Cure workshops this week. I know Brooke posted about it earlier today. I think we've got the registration link in the daily update section. So I hope to see you at either the session tomorrow or one later this week. And then final reminder, our last bonus training is going to be Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. And we are going to be talking all about how to effectively do small group instruction, both what happens at the small group table and what the rest of your class is doing, which I know is always a big question for teachers. So hopefully you will join us then, and have a wonderful Sunday evening until then.